Hello and welcome to another episode of the World Class Real Estate Podcast. Easy for me to say this morning. My name is Mark Worrall. I'm joined by Ian Macbeth. How are you, pal?
I'm good. I'm good. Obviously, we're recording just before Easter, but it's going out just after Easter because we're ahead of the game these days, Mark. We're a week ahead, which is great.
I'm not sure we've ever been quite as organised.
I know, I know. So I hope everyone's had a good Easter, and I'm quite confident that this week and for the rest of the month, it feels like valuations are probably going to pop, and I think we'll see quite a lot of activity the back end of April, which is exciting. But as it stands, yeah, pretty good. I've gone against the grain as usual. Everyone's eating Easter eggs over the last week. I went on the carnivore diet, so just meat, basically.
Have people eaten Easter eggs already?
Yeah. I mean, my missus has been eating Easter eggs since they came in the shop, like at the end of March.
To be fair, my kids have had a Easter egg that they got from after school club, and I may have had a nibble of it when I was a bit hungover the other day. But apart from that, I can't imagine eating Easter eggs until Easter Sunday. But hey ho, I suppose it depends. It is a better type of chocolate, though, isn't it?
It is. It's good. Although I'm not dabbling on it because I'm just eating meat. But I think as soon as the kids break up for that Easter 2 weeks, you're pretty much allowed to get stuck into a
So
packet of Smarties.
just before we go into agency, you mentioned it a couple of times. Why are you eating just meat?
I'm doing it as a fallout from my ultra marathon, where I basically get really carb adapted and train my gut to consume ridiculous amounts of glycogen and carbohydrates, which really kind of give you a bit of inflammation. So this is like a detox to get re-fat adapted, basically. So I can just get the body flushed out of all of the inflammation and just get fat adapted again, so the body can kind of fuel on its main organic source. So there is a bit of science behind the running. Also, I can't run at the moment because I'm injured. So I thought, fancy the carnivore diet. I'm going to give it a bash, and hopefully that will help me for Snowdonia in a couple of weeks when this injury heals up. Fingers crossed. So that's the reason behind it. What's your go-to Easter egg, Mark? What would be your number one pick?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not that into chocolate, if I'm being perfectly honest. I do like an Easter egg because, like I say, it's that better type of chocolate. It's just, in fact, one of the team members here said, I've told my husband to stock up on Easter eggs because we'll just keep them in the cupboard for a couple of months and we'll enjoy it miles more than just a normal piece of chocolate, like a normal bar of chocolate every now and again. I don't know. I always think I would love them to make a big cream egg. I love a Cadbury's cream egg. If you could get any,
Oh, in the middle.
yeah, full Cadbury's cream egg Easter egg, that would be like, I think that would be pretty ultimate. To be perfectly honest, but it's not come out yet. So there you go. There's any
Prick. You could do some damage with that as well, to be fair.
yeah, it'd be like
If you're listening or watching, in the comments, what's your number one Easter egg? Last year they brought out the smashed mini egg Easter egg, where the mini eggs are crumbled into the chocolate. Absolute
Nice.
win. But we'll probably get back to estate agency now after that little section.
Yeah, well, we'll talk a little bit about our guest because it's a bit different to our normal guests that we have. Obviously, there is some significant agency experience in there, but also as he was a member of parliament in the last government and is now the Shadow Secretary of State for levelling up housing and communities. And I always thought that Kevin Hollinrake's he was the housing minister. That's kind of what I had in my head. But actually, he goes on in the episode and before we recorded, because we're recording this after, he explained actually that there's a lot more to it than that, which was really interested, added into some significant insight from a real estate agency sort of powerhouse.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the perfect dovetail of experience, hasn't he? He's kind of got a finger on the pulse in what's going on at government level, at parliament level. But he's grown a very successful and built a very successful from scratch estate agency that's nationally renowned. So he's got this perfect dovetail of experience, a really, really good insight. The episode is great. I thought he was going to give us some really different quality value, and he does. It's definitely worth a listen, and I think we should probably dive straight in and get Kevin on, MP. And like you say, kind of that touch point on housing, levelling up and communities and everything that goes with it. So shall we dive straight in?
Do it. Kevin, a massive thank you for joining us today. We're going to start as we start every podcast, and it'll take you back to the agency days. It's what does world-class real estate look like to you?
Well, thanks for inviting me on, for starters. Great to be here. Great to be talking about the old days. We had some brilliant times. But it's got to be just very customer focused. You know, what I think too often look at estate agency, and I've worked for companies prior to setting up our own company, Hunters, back in 1992, which was too focused on what was important to us, which was obviously driving revenue, exchanges, all the kind of thing, the metrics we look at all the time. To me, we started Hunters with three very simple ambitions, and then the first of the ambition was to deliver a brilliant service to the customer, and that's of course about an end result. So it's a move, and that's what you're there to achieve, to actually us to help get people moving, but it's to what happens in the process as well. So it's the communication, it's the expertise. I say I used to describe it to our franchisees. We started franchising after a few years of being in business. We described it like you should measure success in a estate agency the way they measure success in ice skating. And I always ask them, do you remember how they measure success in ice skating? And nobody ever knows. But and there's two elements to it. One is artistic impression, and the other one's technical merit. So you need both artistic impression and technical merit. Technical merit is being a really good estate agent, knowing that the left-hand side of the street is worth more than the right-hand side of the street, knowing the local catchment areas, the schools, all that kind of stuff, knowing the history of pricing in the area, knowing the local amenities, all the things that are important to people when they're buying a house, and as well as things like construction and stuff. All that is technical merit. Artistic impression is the personability thing of it, being a really good communicator, friendly, approachable. So that you need those two things to go together. You have some agents with one or the other, some with neither. But to get it right, to be world class, you need both.
I love that. I love the ice skating analogy. That's a new one. My wife and my mother-in-law actually went to see The Last Dance with Torvill and Dean on the weekend. So
brilliant.
Yeah, fresh in the mind. I like that. So the artistic aspect of it. Do you think in kind of today's era, the way that marketing is and social media and the need for estate agents to kind of step away from being vanilla, something that maybe we could focus on more as an industry, that part of the artistic side of that, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's not complicated, is it? I mean, that's the thing. It's business is simple, but it's not easy. So, if you're returning phone calls and you're answering emails in good order, in good time, you're doing more than 95% of other agents are doing. So yeah, I mean, you can be outlandish. You obviously need something to attract attention. You need to get the kind of the marketing mix right, all those kind of things. But really, do the simple things well. Would be my advice to anybody. And my business partner, John Waterhouse, we started together. We met each other in independent agency when I was like 22, 23. He was older than me, very a kind of, I don't know what's the word, very kind of suave individual, John, real good guy, and but very business savvy, so a few years older than me. But he said, I asked him one day, he saw businesses actually for a living rather than houses. And I said, come on, John, if you were buying a business, you were setting up a business, what business would you set up? And you must know all about the best businesses. He said, I would just find somebody doing something really well and doing really well, with a big queue of customers out the door kind of thing. And I'd just set up next to them and do it slightly better. And I'm going to say, I thought that was the most stupid idea in the world, actually. I thought, you need something really innovative, really different to set up a business. It's a big mistake, that. He was absolutely right. You just need to you find the best and just do it a bit better. And a bit better in lots of different ways. Is it David Brailsford who ran this Sky cycling team? He did this incremental improvements, which was being better in 100 different ways, 100 different elements of whatever the business you're in, and do everyone a little bit better. So, and I think that's the route to success, really, just being simple things well, but just aspiring to do everything a little bit better.
Yeah, marginal gains. Yeah,
That's it. That's a better way to put it.
I always say estate agency isn't rocket science. It's a lot of little things. And that's exactly replicated there. Can I just ask you a little bit about the customer focused and the hunter's journey? So you said when you set up, it was always about being customer focused, and we know the success of that brand. So how did you retain, as you grew, that focus on the customer coming from front and central, and maybe what challenges did you have across that period?
We got my mum to ring up everybody who did a transaction with us. And I mean it, even when we were big. And my mum, when she sadly passed away, and she was still doing that job when she was 84.
Oh.
But you can imagine, so one of the biggest risks we have when we decide to franchise was that brand reputation. You're going to get people who are running your brand, hunters. We were really proud of our brand. We had 10 offices at the time, we had this customer ethos. So, and we measured customer service all the time. And I dealt with all the complaints as well, which I think is a real focus, even when we got very big. Which is because one of the best learning experiences you can have is speak to a customer who's not happy. But yeah, so as started franchising, we instead of just sending an email out that says, "Did we do really well? Please give us a rating on Google." We just expanded what we did. We got my mum to start ringing every single transaction from every single franchisee, whether it was a sale or a letting, and tell us what they thought. And they would give us a rating, a promotional score, a promoter score. And then my mum would actually ring up those franchisees and tell them about what the customer had said, good or bad. And she'd always, in my Saturday morning visits to my mum, she'd always tell me as well when they were particularly good ones or particularly bad ones. So yeah, it just putting a lot of work into making sure that you understand what the customer's thinking and how well you actually did. And I think we had a would you recommend us score, which was the key score we used to use, of 94, 95% on an annual basis. It varied between the two, which is quite high industry-wise. So it was those kind of things, checks and balances. But really, back to what I said before, with the three important things, the number one thing was looking after the customer. And when we got our franchisees in, or we got our new managers in, or new staff in, they all went through the same induction process, which talks about the three things, and they put the customer first. And we talk about the things like the ice skating. I would go and do like an hour with every new inductee, whether you're a franchisee or an employee, to say, this is what we believe in. And if people see you really do it, really believing it as a leader, then they're more likely to do it. If they know it's important to you, and it's important enough to me to get my mum to do all those calls, they're more likely to be able to actually deliver that performance and take pride in the performance of the customer service performance of our business. So that was how we did it, really.
Yeah, I love that. It really kind of dictates the culture from top all the way through the spine of the business. And there's nothing more powerful than feedback, good or bad. It kind of really does help you grow and develop and evolve. So
yeah, your people have really got to believe in you as an individual. And if they think you're fake, they're not going to do what you say. You're not going to, if they think you're just saying something for other purposes. But if they really believe that you believe in the customer, then they're more likely to deliver that level of service as well.
Yeah, fantastic. I want to segue into being a member of Parliament, if that's okay, and kind of talk about that. It's something that really interests us. Me and Mark were talking off camera. We wanted to make sure that we got the title right. So I copy and pasted it straight from your LinkedIn. But Shadow Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. Could you just give the listeners, the people that are watching, what does that title involve? What are your responsibilities? And then we'll ask some questions off the back of that, if that's okay.
Yeah, so breaking that title down, levelling up is trying to make sure the UK is there's equal opportunity wherever you are in the UK, which is not right now. So making sure no community is left behind. Housing is what it says on the tin, making sure we deliver enough houses and affordable houses to people right around the country. And communities it involves local government, but so making sure we have well-functioning local communities, really, and then we have community cohesion. So we don't have divided societies, but also the people that on the ground well looked after. There's this inexorable link between central government, which tends to do the legislations kind of stuff, and actually service delivery on the ground, which is through agencies. Probably the most important one of those agencies or levels, tiers of government is local government. And we often ignore that as part of the whole picture of politics. Really important.
And what are the kind of, on the housing section of that, what is the stuff that you're working on? What's the stuff that you feel will come to fruition that will kind of benefit, I guess, the public and our industry as well, as it's an industry podcast?
Well, we talk about housing crisis. There's no one housing crisis. There's a number of housing crises. And the most important of those is affordable housing, both to purchase and to rent. Mm-hmm. So allowing people to get on the first rung of the housing ladder, first time buyers, but also people who are on lower incomes be able to rent something or indeed purchase something or part purchase something they can afford. Those are the key elements, key crises. There's also different parts of the country where the crises are different. It's because the housing market is almost different almost wherever you go. So we tend to talk about the housing market in terms of the solutions to the problem is building more homes, building 1.5 million homes as the target is for this parliament. That's not the solution. That's just a means to an end. And you can build 1.5 million homes and still be in exactly the same place as we are today, no further on. You've got to identify the actual problems and then target those exact problems. I actually think, these targets are meaningless, both in terms of the solution, in terms of people's perceptions of the solutions and the realities of the solution. I don't think that solves a problem at all. I don't think the market generally needs 1.5 million or 2 million more houses, whatever else. I think the imbalance between supply and demand in the UK is so far out of kilter. You could build 5 million and you'd still be facing similar problems. You need to build the right things in the right places for the right people. And I say the primary issue around that to me is houses for young people and older who don't own a house to get onto the housing ladder, and those houses that are affordable, either social rent or affordable rent, that people can truly afford to live in and have some long-term security in.
So are you? It's a nice soundbite, though, isn't it? But are you talking about having a more specific policy across different areas of the country, depending on what that specific area needs, working closer with local government? Then, by the sounds of things,
I think that's exactly right. That kind of happens now already because you have different housing targets in different areas, and I think this government's got all those targets all wrong, I've got to say. But not that they've got everything wrong in terms of housing policy. You've got some things right. But yes, to a certain extent, that's right, because the challenges in London are different from the challenges. So shared ownership might be more important in London, for example, in terms of getting people a housing ladder than it is in the outskirts of Manchester, where housing is more affordable. So those are the different challenges, but also some systemic issues within the nation as a whole. For example, first-time buyers getting on the housing ladder. That's one. That's a problem to look at in its own right. So people would say, okay, it's very difficult for young people to get on the housing ladder because houses are really expensive. The cost of a house is really expensive. Actually, that's not the major problem. If you look at the percentage of take-home pay that the average mortgage payer pays as a percentage of their income, it is hardly any different than it was 30 years ago. It's stayed pretty consistent. It's had a bit of a spike over the last couple of years. Interest rates shot up, but they're coming down again. So people are spending about a third of their take-home pay on the average mortgage. So that's not generally the problem. Let's say it's not a problem at all, but it's not generally the problem. The biggest problem is the deposit. That's what the challenge most for first-time buyers face. So we had lots of interventions around that to try and help. So stamp duty discounts. We had things like right to buy, for example, help to buy. We had the mix of affordable homes, which are homes delivered by developers, usually by a Section 106 agreement agreement to get the planning consent in the first place, delivered for people to purchase as well as to rent. But we shift the mix away from just rented to houses to purchase, like shared ownership or first homes, other things. Those are the kind of interventions we put in place as a government. Now, interestingly, and we should always look at the signals from governments, I think, virtually all of those different policy interventions have been scrapped. Mm-hmm. So, yes, they want to build 1.5 million more homes, but they're not focused on first-time buyers. And that is an unarguable fact. So their focus is just building more homes in the hope that generally prices will moderate, which I don't think they will. Not for that reason anyway. But building more social and affordable homes to rent, which I'm not saying is not the right thing to do, but to me, not exclusively, because you're only tackling one of the crises in the housing market.
Yeah, it feels on the ground, it feels very much like that, especially after, obviously, the recent stamp duty holiday was not renewed, came to an end, and we went back to the old equivalent. Without the incentives that were available for first-time buyers, key workers, etc., even through new build, to now not have the stamp duty, where probably the average first-time buyer, where I am in the south of England, is going to pay an extra $4,000 in tax now.
Yep.
That impacts their purchasing power by about £16,000 to £20,000 when you take that out of their mortgage deposit. It does very much feel like we started to get somewhere. The first-time buyers were the dominant buyers again.
Yeah, that's right.
They were about a third of the market, especially where I am. They were about a third of the market, sometimes hitting 35, 36% of transactions. That seems to be unraveled now a little bit with how things have gone, which I think is a shame, because of the way that rents have got out of control means that a first-time buyer could now very easily get stuck without those incentives, because of, if they have to live away from their parents, the cost of rent has just, it's gone up like 10% nearly every year since lockdown. And it seems like they're trapped a little bit in the ability to save that deposit.
Definitely. And there's something very fundamental about this, in that, I was, at times in my life hasn't looked all that good. I was before we started Hunters back in 92, I was in pretty difficult financial straits. And but one thing I always had is I always had the belief that I could build something with in my life, and build my stake in society, if you like. And there's three ways to do that, really. Either you save, which I wasn't very good at, or you start a business, or you buy a house. And it was drummed into me by my parents that certainly starting a business, buying a house, are things, and saving actually, were things you should do. And so I always believed I'd get that stake in society for me, for my family, 4 kids and stuff. So, but if people don't think they've got that, I think we are really struggling as a society. There's an old African proverb which says something like, if we don't welcome young people into the village, they'll burn it down just to feel its warmth. And if people do not feel that if they don't believe, people won't believe in capitalism if they can't accumulate capital. Mm-hmm. And that's capitalism, the only system that works on this planet. So if people lose faith in that, and so you see people losing faith in capitalism, you see people losing faith in democracy. That's a scary prospect. So really, we need to make sure that young people, and even older people who haven't had the same opportunities that I have, do have those opportunities. And I think we are basically pulling the rug out from underneath them.
Yeah.
And do you get the opportunity to have those conversations with the Labour Party and try to understand why, for example, the stamp duty decision was made? Because it sounds like you as a party are fairly against some of the changes that they've made since they came into power. Do you have any more insight than we would why those decisions are being made?
Well, it's not accidental, of course. I talked to Angela Rayner. I talked to Matthew Pennycook, who's a very decent guy and bright guy. I do. And they know what they're doing. People, there's massive protests going on for family farm tax, if I can just digress a little bit, about this inheritance tax for farmers. And, quite rightly, they're trying to get the government to see sense. But I say, well, this isn't like an accident. it is deliberate. It's ideological. They don't want people to inherit wealth, or they want more people to that money to be spread around, rather than thinking just pass it on to your next generation. So the signals are really important, because they're not. I say if you add up what the government is doing, there is a clear picture here, which is fundamentally socialist, in my view. I'm not saying the raving Marxists or anything, but I think, to me, you can't be a little bit socialist. So you're only going to go down one route with this, because you have to effectively keep putting taxes up. And so I think the next taxes go up. My view will be capital gains tax. We've already gone up a little bit. They didn't get any pushback on that. Actually, it's one of the things that people shrug their shoulders on, really, because I think people thought it would be worse, but I think it will be worse. Sooner or later, with these kind of policies, as Margaret Thatcher said, you run out of other people's money. And when you do that, the only lever you can reach for is the tax lever, because they'll never hit spending that effectively. So yes, we have the conversations, but there'll be no. Angela Rayner's not for turning in terms of those kind of policies.
It's a funny one, because it feels like the majority of the wealth in the UK sits in the baby boomer generation, which the baby boomer generation have the ability to give the younger people below the deposits and the first time buyers, and they have the ability to pass the wealth down, but a big chunk of it is in property. And we always talk in agency of wouldn't it be great if there was and it sounds horrific when you say it like this, but you'll get the context, like a last time buyer incentive, because what we're trying to do is move the equity down. And the last time that a stamp duty holiday came in, what estate agents quickly discovered was it was fantastic for the bottom of the market, but no one was moving from the big 4-bed detached houses that £15,000 incentive and benefit was actually going to help. So all of a sudden, we just had these massive chains with no top to close. Everyone doesn't want to leave their home. It is their castle. And, a lot of the baby boomer generation at the top end of that don't want to leave their 4-bed detached that's got no mortgage on. And it feels like in some sort of logical way with this tax that's now come in on inheritance, if we could educate and say, okay, well, look, these are the parameters that we have to work in. But if we could educate that part of the market to say, you can be more tax benefit by downsizing and supporting your child now with a deposit, rather than when you pass away, unfortunately, and then they get taxed on it. There's an education piece that needs to come out there to help move the money down, rather than just looking at the bottom upwards.
Yeah, and we should always look at different interventions, as I said before, because you can't solve the problems in the housing market purely by creating extra supply, because supply and demand is so far out of kilter. So that's why we have things like stamp duty discounts and help to buy. And you're right, I've heard lots of people suggest different kind of incentives for people that who might want to downsize, and creating different opportunities for the economy and for people through that. So yeah, I mean, we should always look at that. We're now in the process of these policy commissions, as Kevin Badenoch has phrased them, where we're looking at policies for the next Parliament, for our next manifesto, and we're also obviously keen to make sure that this government tries to pick up some good ideas we might have, although there's not too much sign of that right now. So listen, if people have good ideas about how we should stimulate certain parts of the market, we're all ears. One thing I would say about all this, though, it was never easy to get on the housing market, on the housing ladder. It was never easy. So I'm not saying, oh yeah, you've never had it so good to people. I'm not saying it's easy today. It's probably more difficult today. So that's why we need interventions. But if you want to buy a house, you've got to make sacrifices. That's the reality. You've got to work that bit harder. You've got to take one more job. You've got to not go on that holiday. All those things. You've got to focus on raising that deposit. And if you do, you'll be successful. You get on the housing ladder. If you get a decent job and you work hard and save, you can do it. But we want to make it easier, and that's definitely be part of the policy making that we come forward with as we come towards the next election.
Yeah, no, well said. And I think that's something that it'll be important over the next couple of years. Obviously, we're now in this sort of world post lockdown, 5 years sort of later, 4 years later, where it is different. It has changed, and the next generation of people, they are looking at it slightly different, but the more that we can do to support them, the better. And I think education is a big part of that as well, because I think it is tough, but lenders want to lend. We've seen major lenders just this week alone increasing their rate of earnings towards that 5 times income. So, especially in the 95 and 90% loan to value products. So the banks are doing their part in terms of wanting to lend to the first time buyer. We just a little kick in the right direction would help. I just wanted to touch, because I loved this product, and I said to Mark I was going to mention it, but I saw that you were a co-owner of Visi Home before.
That's right.
Chairman of Hunters, and that is data and kind of the analytics and the statistics something you've always been interested in, or did you just kind of stumble across that?
Oh yeah, definitely. So I mentioned three objectives we had when we started our business. First was give a brilliant service to the customer. The other one is to win in the marketplace, but also we wanted to win in the bigger marketplace, which is the UK. So we started in York. We wanted to dominate the York market. There was lots of agents there. We wanted to be number one, and we also have this aspiration to be number one in the UK. So that's what we set about. We wanted to be number one. How do you measure it? Okay, well, you measure it by, in the old days, you drove around all the streets, do the board count. Literally every month, and you compared it month on month, and it's pretty laborious, but it was, it set the tone for the company, and we did it in every office we had. So it got to about 2008. We're still doing this, and we'd mention all our managers' meetings. This is important. We'd ask them to present their market share and every manager meeting. So, but then this guy came along and said, I don't know. I kind of found him, but he found us anyway. He said, but rather than you doing your manual board counts, I've got this product. I can't remember what it's called even now. But anyway, it's uses, basically we scrape Rightmove and Zoopla and stick all the information in an access database, and then you can measure your market share automatically. And so, that's fantastic, just what we need. I'll have 9 licenses, please. Like salespeople are the easiest people to sell to. This guy sold to me quite easily. And I spent $6,000, I think, on buying these licenses. And the product was actually pretty poor. But a mate of mine, Jez Ward, who's sadly now passed away, in fact, my best mate, Jez, we were at school together. And I talked to him about this one day. He's in tech. And he said, well, okay, I can build that. I can help you build that. He wasn't a techie, but he was a project manager. And he did. And this amazing product, actually, which I never thought was possible, literally scraped every single postcode in the UK down to the full 7 digits every single week and stuck them in a proper database. And we kind of deduped it and stuff like that to make sure the information was accurate and then easy to utilize. And it was incredible. And we ended up, we ended up selling it to, in terms of on a subscription basis, it was just about every agent in the UK. Certainly about half the UK estate agency population was using Visi Home. Brilliant. And we sold to Zoopla about 5 years after we started in 2008, and we sold it in 2013.
I mean, I loved it. I was branch manager of a big town, about 50,000 chimney pots, mostly 1960s houses where all the parking was in a little cluster, and then you'd have to walk down the pathways to get to them. Doing a board count was a pain in the backside to actually get out the car to find the boards. Yeah. And once it came along, I was like, this is a game changer. Just straight away.
Well, it was. And I remember, the use of it was brilliant. I went to one of our offices, Sheffield franchise, which is a lovely big office, Hunter's Bar in Sheffield. And the office wasn't doing very well. I went in, and the owner, the franchisee, but he had a manager. He was quite an experienced franchisee. There was a manager, and I can't remember his name. But anyway, I arrived there for this meeting to try and help turn the branch around a bit. And I arrived there like 9:15. I'd travel from home, so I let us off at 7 o'clock. Anyway, the manager toddles in about 9:30. Oh, sorry, I'm late. He says, okay, no problem. And so I said, okay. So and we had the franchisee. I said, how's it going then? I said, well, yeah, it's going all right, doing all right. I said, well, you put virtually very little on the market in the last month. You put like 10 houses on the market. I said, oh, well, that's true, but nobody's putting anything on the market right now. It's really quiet. Oh, really? Okay, I said, well, according to this our Busy Home report here for your area, you've put 10 on the market, and Blundell's have put 44 on the market in that same period of time. And that changes the conversation at that point in time. And you also changes your ability to understand what's actually happening in the marketplace. So that, and that's why most agents in the UK don't make decent amount of money, or hardly any money, or sometimes lose money, because they're not got significant market share. And I don't think you can make money in UK estate agency without having a significant market share. Certainly in the middle market, the normal mainstream market. Yes, of course, at the top end of the market, but even though those guys have got to kind of dominate their market. So it's hugely important. And that analysis and access to information is fundamental.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Hopefully technical merit goes back to that point, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Can you actually get some houses on the market? Yes, it's the thing is what actually goes wrong with agents is early on in our kind of our life as hunters. Early on, we came across a book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. It's actually some old cassette tapes we got. Somebody left it in the house we were selling, and John got it, and we all listened to it. And he breaks it down like this: every business has only 3 elements to it: lead generation, lead conversion, and customer fulfillment. Actually, second 2, if you're worth your salt, are dead easy. You can't get a house on the market. I mean, you should be able to get half the house in the market you go and see, and that are going on the market, and looking after the customer is pretty straightforward. Lead generation is really, really tough. So 95% of your success is, can you generate leads? And that's really it. That's what's the key thing is in terms of success in our industry, in any business, is lead generation. And the thing is, it's bloody hard work.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the book, and I think those 3 parts are really, really important for the industry to understand, is that there are some fantastic estate agents that operate, but where the struggle comes, and they can do the fulfillment part very well, and there's some fantastic people at lead conversion as well, but where the fundamentals become different is the respect that the industry have means that as a nation, the public, we just see the same stuff from agents, which lead generation becomes a bit of a dogfight, a knee jerk, which is not the modern way of marketing. There's some phenomenal kind of experience that you've gathered in your career with obviously where you are now and with hunters as well. If there was some advice that you would give people in estate agency world for the next kind of 5 years, looking at what the next 5 years looks like, what would kind of be the consultancy advice that you may kind of snapshot give to some of the agency owners and people trading as senior agents out there?
Well, I'd be optimistic about the next 5 years. First of all, I don't think the UK is going to go into recession or anything. I don't think the housing market's going to go into recession. The only time we've seen that is really when there's been a shortage of finance available in my time, in the last 40 years. So I don't see those conditions arising. So you can be positive. You can be positive about expansion or setting up whatever you're doing. But I honestly don't think the fundamentals have changed really in terms of the success, what you need to do to be successful. So back to focus on lead generation. And I've got to say, I was with one very successful agent, or historically very successful agent in London. You might guess which one it was. A few years ago, they've actually turned themselves around now, and it wasn't as successful. They lost half their market share. And I was with the MD, chief exec, and I said, how's it going? And he said, well, we're doing all right. We're doing well in lettings, focusing on that area. I said, well, I live in London, and I used to get your glossy magazine through my door every single month without fail. And that hasn't come through my door now for years. And he said, oh, well, no, we don't do that anymore because we've moved to this, we've got this new technology that lets us identify who's likely to move in an area. And we target that through kind of social media and other kind of methods. All right, okay. So you don't think the halving of your market share is related to the fact you've stopped doing physical marketing of your product. No, it's not where it is anymore. I fundamentally disagree. I think they'd completely lost the plot. The way way marketing works, it's the multiplier effect. So I remember somebody putting a house on the market with a good friend of mine, Martin Robinson, for co-director, and he'd asked him why he put the house on the market with Hunters rather than the other 4 agents that had been around. He said, you came out to value my house. He said, the next day, he said, I left work and I passed one of your Hunters minis in the road. He said, I arrived back at my house. I opened the door. There was one of your leaflets on my doormat. He said, I switched it, turned on my own computer. One of your email newsletters dropped in my inbox. And I switched on the radio and your advert came on. And those 4 things together. And that's the way marketing works. It's not just leaflets, of course, but it is the mix of everything. We call it the big 5 at Hunters, 5 things you need to do all the time. And again, we've made the mistakes. I remember as a chairman, you mentioned I moved to chairman from chief exec. I came into a board meeting, and said, I saw our market share was dropping in some of our core markets. So what's going on? And we drilled it down. How many times are you doing our leaflet distribution? And we used to have a thing, every single house in our catchment area, a leaflet every single month. We're down to 6 times a year now. Why are we doing that? 6 times a year rather than 12? Because we were cutting costs. We want to cut costs because the top line's not as good as it was. So we need to, that's just a road to nowhere. I mean, in fact, it's a road to somewhere, which is insolvency. So it's easy to make economies, but they can be false economies. And I don't think the process of building your reputation, building your name awareness has changed fundamentally over the last few years.
Yeah, we at Avocado Property, we call it omnipresence. You call it the big one. And I think whether you're into leaflets or whether you're into forecasting or whatever it may be, we've got a slightly differing opinion there. But whatever method of marketing you're into, at the end of the day, what we're talking about is your marketing budget. And if I totally agree with you fundamentally, every time I see the market kind of fall back a little bit, or in December or in August, when a lot of agents pull back on their marketing spend, we always double down in those months.
Yeah, good for you.
Because we know that that's the bit where we can separate ourselves from the parapet and we can be the omnipresent agent at that point. So it's kind of going against the grain there. And when there is a recession, the people that make, I'm not saying there is going to be one, but when there is a recession, the people that make money are the ones that invest, at that time. Trump obviously did his thing over in the US and the stock market crashed. There's no doubt that the rich people were buying stock at that point when it hit.
Oh, yeah.
And then a couple of days later, he'd let his, golf buddies into the secret, and then he
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
All of a sudden it changes. So it's being on the right end of the curve, isn't it? And being brave, I think, is a big.
Yeah, it is. It is. And having the resources to say those bold moves when things are tough, to keep on pushing that marketing, because you're right, you can really mop up at those times if you keep at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all of that comes down, whatever your opinion on whatever the marketing method is, really, the message here is to be consistent with it. Know what you do. You don't have to stick to it, forever, but be consistent with whatever you do so people come to expect it. Your example with the London agency was you'd started to come to expect that glossy magazine. And when that stopped coming through, you're like, no, what's happened? Then because of your knowledge of agency, you then think, well, actually, maybe this is a contributing factor. But when people start to expect certain marketing outputs from you and you no longer deliver them, then that has a big impact, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does. It does. And, this stuff never works with 1 or 2 attempts at something. You've got to have it. I'm not saying you don't change if some things aren't working. But fundamentally, I know what works, and I know what the good agents do, and they've got good market share, and the ones that haven't got market share don't do, and so. But yeah, absolutely, you've got to look at this strategically rather than symptomatically.
Yeah, totally agree. No, it's good fundamentals to have, and whatever the identity is of your business, like we talk about I nearly said their name then, but we know who we're talking about. The London agent that you discussed, it is very clear that was their identity, was having that brochure come through. It was part of what you associated with them. And once it stopped, it lost its association. And that's where potentially the downfall in their market share came from, because it was expected as well.
Yeah, sure.
No, brilliant. Thank you for your time, Kevin, and thank you for coming on. It was actually my business partner saw you speak at an event. I can't remember which one. And he said to me, I heard Kevin speak. He was really interesting. You should definitely get him on the podcast. And I'm glad we did, because there's some really good insight in all sorts of different angles there for our listeners that are predominantly estate agents. So really appreciate your time, and good luck with obviously what you've decided to put your hands into, with MP type stuff. It sounds like you've really got your hands full there, but I can see the smile on your face that you enjoy it at the same time. You enjoy the challenge.
I do. And you got to do some, find a job you love. You never work again. And I love the world of agency. I love the world of business. It's a business where you're competing toe to toe every day, and if you don't win, it is a zero-sum game. If you don't win, the others do.
Yeah,
and I like that. The fact that if we got a house on the market that the others were expecting to get on the market, it was like back in those days, it was like a $6 grand turnaround. $3,000 out of their bank account and $3,000 into ours, and that always excited me. And to see more boards up than anybody else, and see the success we had, of becoming a national business and all the listings and all that kind of stuff. It was just great fun. Oh, that actually the third thing of those three things. I'll let you give the last thing. It was great customer service. It was winning the marketplace. The third thing was we were going to have a lot of fun. And that's what we did. And that's what kept the energy within our business, really. Because even though we worked really hard, we had a lot of fun doing it. And that's the other secret to success, I would say.
Yeah. I haven't stumbled across, in 21 years of being an elite agent that isn't positive and competitive. And that's what I think, obviously, the conversation kind of sums down to, is if you've got that positive, ambitious outlook and you're super competitive, you enjoy winning, it's a big part of the reason why we stick around in this industry. And, we enjoy our day-to-day stuff. It is challenging, it is tough, but it's a hell of a lot of fun at the same time.
Dead right.
Yeah.
Touche.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Appreciate it. And
pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of your week.
All right. Thanks very much.
I'd like to thank you once again to Kevin Hollinrake for joining us today. As we said in the intro, Ian, insight from the agency world, but also a different slant on it, which I thought was, really, really interesting. One of my favourite podcasts that we've done for a long time, I think.
Yeah, I love knowledge, and I love and people that have got experience in areas that I don't. I was doing this podcast, we were in a sort of privileged position to ask questions that we want answers for, which coincidentally, 90% of the people listening probably want the same answer as well. So, I love how he simplified agency, like put the MP stuff to one side for a second, but, talking about the ice skating, that artistic versus technical side of things, talking about the three sort of pillars that come from the Myth book, lead generation, lead conversion, and fulfillment. Just really simple kind of core values that you could just adopt instantly and kind of utilize within a business for a training session. It inspired me to want to make a video as soon as we kind of hang up the call, because it's just good stuff that I think people love to understand, because it's simple and effective, and I like that.
I love the ice skating analogy, and it's so simple. We talk about it in those sort of roundabout ways, but actually the way that he talked about it as the ice skating analogy makes it so much more memorable. And I think that's something that we can all learn when we are, if we are talking to business owners or people trying to build culture within a team. Actually, a number of those things that he talked about there were very memorable. Added into, you mentioned, you could see the smile on his face when he was talking about agency towards the end. You could see there was still that competitive spirit, still that desire to succeed. And actually, he mentioned it as we of many people, enjoy what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. You could still see he has that energy and that competitive spirit that is so important in agency.
very topical based on last week's episode as well, where we were talking about, solution searching and problem finders. And
Yeah.
I use the phrase shit magnet or, money maker. But
Yeah.
ultimately what we're talking about on this one is, are you a winner? Do you have that winning mindset? Are you competitive, positive? And I just thought that was great, just to see someone like Kevin that's kind of done the hard part, built it, moved out, sold it, kind of now doing something that he sees as a passion. But you could just see it when he was talking about agency, just that sort of winning mentality, wanting to beat the competition. I think he even said, there's nothing greater than the feeling of putting that $3,000 in your pipeline, not someone else's.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, as agents, we do love that part of it. We don't talk about it too much as well, because it feels a bit awkward, doesn't it, sometimes?
Yeah, we don't talk about it, but actually that's probably one of the things that we talk about, people falling into agency, then becoming these lifelong, estate agency business owners, a lot of people that have been in it a long time. But actually that probably comes down to it, that competitive spirit, probably a little bit underestimated within the business, how important that actually is. But you could really see, and the politics side of things, that was a really interesting insight to see the difference in policy between the two parties and the difference in opinion. Worrying a little bit about, some of the things that he was talking about from a first-time buyer perspective. Be interesting to see how that translates into the future. But still a very positive outlook, even though he had those opinions on the policies. And I think that's something that we can remember as well. You might have different opinion on policies, but actually you can still have a positive outlook in where the market is, how the economy is going to perform, and what have you.
Yeah, it's hard to, when you look at the sort of government, the parliament side of things, it's really hard to have a justified opinion on it, because we can't see behind the scenes what they're thinking. We can just see the top slice of information, and it changes so much all the time. You can't forecast it. You can't plan around it. That's the uncertainty that I think none of us like, is we sort of don't know really where we stand. But the one thing that he did say is, kind of having belief in the fact that there aren't financial issues and the market will continue. There is obviously a shortage of supply in whichever way you look at that, from a rental to social to normal residential to new build. But I think the banks, they want to lend, and that's the key phrase here, is if there's the appetite to lend, then the move will happen. It's just at what level of transactions do we see in the country for us as estate agents anyway. And it feels that it's quite stable at the moment in a kind of roundabout way, if I can use that sort of word. Interest rates are fairly stable. There's no drastic changes or drops. Buyer demand and stock coming to the market is fairly stable. Even the fallout of stamp duty hasn't really changed that much, other than that there's probably a little bit less in terms of buyers out there now, or buying power is a little bit lighter.
Yeah, I've been using the term typical property market. It feels like we're in a very typical property market. You said on the intro, April, valuations, instructions. We had our best week for a little while last week with loads and loads of sales. It does feel like we're in that seasonal high of the property market, and that is a typical thing that we maybe haven't had maybe last year, but certainly those early post-COVID years we hadn't had that. But actually these are the markets where good agents can really show the worth. There's a two-tone market. There's 100% properties sitting on the market that have come on the market too expensive, badly marketed, they're not selling. And we were having a conversation in our business. We don't want that business. We genuinely are not interested in that, that second-hand stock, because I think that is a really tough sell now. The market that we want is the stuff that's coming to market with motivated sellers, well-priced, well-presented, and that is moving pretty quickly. And that's pretty typical in a property market. If you look back, probably 15 years, you'll always have the overpriced stock that just sits. The motivated sellers are getting moving, and there is definitely that opportunity, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's the seesaw of profit versus volume. And in this market, you want the profitable stuff, not the volume stuff necessarily. And I think when you're in a baseline market, as very, very much as you just said there, good agents can be great and average agents will disappear, because it is that. And if you've built your career on the post-COVID buzz. You know, if you've been in it for 3 years and it's been pretty easy sailing, this is a different world now, and you'll either grow from it and become the agent that you're going to be for your career, or you'll step away from it because it's not for you, because the order taking days are kind of gone and you've got to actually be good at what you do. So, you know, if you are new to the industry, that's not a problem. You just got to embrace it, learn, develop. We all kind of experienced that at some point. You know, for us, it was the difference of 05, 06, 07, then 8, 9 and 10, two different worlds. And it makes you who you are, you know. So it's a time to kind of skill up your knowledge, skill up your negotiation skills, your communication skills, have the right information, and be one of the agents that becomes elite off the back of, you know, a market which is a baseline market, really. But yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah, love the episode. Feel really good for the day, and
yeah, absolutely,
and charged, ready to go.
Yeah, it's a great. Just one final thing on that. It's a great opportunity for people to get on the ice rink, look at the technical merit, look at the artistic impression, and try and work around. And it's never been easier for agents now to try and get that product knowledge and the personal. What did he say? Personal ability. That's right, isn't it? That is just a practice thing. If you've not got that naturally, then that's just a pure practice thing. So nice way to segue back into the ice skating analogy. A massive thank you once again to Kevin for joining us today. As you know, we do this because we love our industry. We want to see it improve and get better. If you haven't enjoyed today's episode, please share it out there with colleagues. A little bit different from what we normally do with the political insight. I'm Mark Worrall. He's Ian Macbeth. Thank you very much for listening. See you again next week.